This is a short presentation following my trip to Holy Land that was organised by Southwark Diocese and led by Bishop Christopher and his chaplain and 2 clergy. There were 30 of us from the Diocese of Southwark and 30 curates at different stages from their first through to their 3rd year. I'm very thankful to Southwark for providing this opportunity, and also a small contribution from St John's PCC to enable me to go. So the trip was from the 4th to the 11th of May. We were staying at a place called St George's College in Jerusalem. And this is the Anglican Centre for Pilgrimage, Education, Hospitality and Reconciliation. The college staff there who were leading the pilgrimage included the Very Reverend Canon Richard Soule, he's the Dean, the Reverend Rodney Aist, who's the course director, and Amy Taylor, who is the Porter Fellow, the course assistant. It was a great location. It was a very short walk from the Damascus Gate within the old city. And as you can see, a beautiful setting. That's the photograph on the left in terms of the sunrise. It was just a beautiful location. On day 1, we went to Kerem. That's the church of the Visitation, where it's believed that in that area the Magnificat from Luke's Gospel took place when Mary visits Elizabeth. And let me read you a bit from Luke chapter 1. At that time Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. And then we go on to hear Mary's song as she sings, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant." A beautiful day that we visited. It's quite high up on the hills, and there's some really cool pictures and paintings and sculptures. The one on the left really stuck out with Mary and Elizabeth greeting each other. And inside, some great pictures. You see on the left, the very kind of ornate depiction in the upper chamber of the church, and also this is the back of the church, the right hand side. An amazing painting depicting the woman and the dragon, no dragon but the woman from Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. So that painting goes some way to depict the woman believed to be Mary, clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. Then later on that day we went to the Israel West Bank's separation barrier, and we looked at various murals and paintings on the wall. This picture on the right of your screen showing the lady in the flak jacket. This is Shireen Abu Akleh, and on the 11th of May last year, 2022, Israeli forces shot dead Shireen. She was an Al Jazeera journalist, and she was a long-time TV correspondent for Al Jazeera Arabic, and she was killed while covering Israeli army raids in the city of Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. She was wearing a press vest and was standing with other journalists when she was shot and killed. And we were told that to this day no one has been held accountable. It was a very difficult part of the city to see because of the wall and the violence and the protests that quite often will come up between Palestinians and the Israeli army. The picture on the left is quite well known, one of Banksy's graffiti paintings of the dove in a flak vest carrying an olive branch, and there are quite a few of these across the wall in imitation of Banksy, and just demonstrating the unhappiness about that separation. And on the right you can see just about the building called a walled off hotel, obviously to parody the Waldorf Hotel. And this is funded and supported by Banksy, encouraging people to come to this part of the city and to come and see a side of Jerusalem that a lot don't see. We then walked around and saw other pictures. Again, there's two more there with the chairs, with the painting of the wall that looks like a hole broken through looking out to Jerusalem. And then another protester on the right who's remembered by one of her pictures. Then we had lunch in Bethlehem, an Ada called the Ada refugee camp. This is a Palestinian camp established in 1950. It's partially surrounded by the West Bank barrier, and it's near to two large Israeli settlements that are illegal, apparently under international law. And there's a constant military presence, so it's often a flashpoint around here. The camp is vulnerable to a number of concerns, including incursions by the Israeli military and clashes involving camp residents, many of whom are children. You can see some there in the photograph. And there are an increasing number of injuries as a result of excessive force by the Israeli military. But we visited Islam. She's one of the ladies in this centre picture on the left. And she told us her story, how she had grown up around that area. She says she has no good memories from childhood, and it's a very sad tale. She kind of cooks and welcomes for visitors to come to hear a bit more about the Ada refugee camp. So that was really interesting, really good to meet her, and a great lunch. I felt very privileged to go there. So from there we were whisked off to the Church of the Nativity. Every day is Christmas. as you go into this church, it's a little bit gaudy. You can see the centre photograph of got lots of baubles and decorations that looks like they're from 100 years ago. But again, we just reflected on the birth of Jesus, where it's often said that this is the place it took place. So just reading from Luke 2, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem. So this is to commemorate that event. It was very strange coming out of this church because there was a service going on. I think it was a Roman Catholic service, and they were singing "O Come All Ye Faithful" to a rather tinny backing track. It was very bizarre, very strange. So anyway, that was the Church of the Nativity and the end of day 1. Day 2, if anyone's been to Jerusalem, they'll recognise this very famous sight from the Mount of Olives. It's a view that you never get bored of. How many times you see it, you drive past it, you just have to stop and look. So at the beginning of day 2, we went up to the Mount of Olives. To the left of this picture is the Kidron Valley coming across, and you can see the golden dome, the Dome of the Rock, in the centre of the photo. And we're looking at the eastern wall. You can just see the Golden Gate, which is actually blocked up, kind of right middle. And then toward the end of the wall is the Lion's Gate, which we went into. And you can see all the Muslim, Christian and Jewish burial sites in the foreground. A very dramatic sight. Then we walked down the Mount of Olives, and again you just kind of think about Luke 19 when it describes Jesus riding on a colt and people spreading their clothes on the road and shouting, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord," as you descend down past these very ancient olive trees. And then we visited the Dominus Flevit church, which is the references the Lord wept from Luke chapter 19. Again, thinking about Jesus descending down on the colt, we read, "As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes." And inside this tiny church, you can see on the right the altar looking out toward the city and the wall. And then on the front of the altar, you can just see it. It's a bit dark on the photograph on the right, so I've enlarged it in the middle. You can see the hen and the chicks referenced by Jesus in Luke 13 and Matthew 23. When Jesus is just describing his sorrow for Jerusalem, he says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." So a few references to those passages. And then down into the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Church of all Nations, where as you go in, it's very dark, and you just have these pinpricks of light that come through. So you can imagine Jesus at night in the garden praying, and it kind of evokes that scene. And outside, we just reflected on some of that, thinking of those passages from Mark and Luke in Gethsemane. One of these passages says this: "They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I pray.' He took Peter, James and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. 'My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death,' he said to them. 'Stay here and keep watch.'" So you can see us there on the right, someone just reading out that passage as we just kind of sat and thought and reflected about that. So yeah, then we walked into the old city by the Lion's Gate toward the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And according to tradition dating back to the 4th century, this church contains two sites considered obviously to be very holy in Christian history: the site where Jesus was crucified, Calvary or Golgotha, and Jesus' empty tomb. So the tomb itself is enclosed in a 19th century shrine called the Aedicule, and the main denominations sharing property over parts of the church. Well, there's 6 denominations. There's Roman Catholic, there's Greek Orthodox, an Armenian Apostolic, and then also the Coptic, the Syriac, and the Ethiopian Orthodox churches. So between those 6 denominations, there's something called the status quo, and this is an understanding between religious communities dating back to the 18th century, and this applies to this site. And the status quo is an understanding where it preserves the division of ownership and responsibilities of the various Christian sites, and this is one of them. And that decreed that no changes could be made without the consensus of all 6 Christian communities. So this ladder, which you can see in the middle of the screen, if you just go up left, you can see where that's placed. That's remained in the same location since at least the 18th century as a result of the status quo. So nothing can be changed, nothing moved, and that's what that immovable ladder is called. Represents that. When we first went inside the Holy Sepulchre, it was just absolutely rammed, couldn't move, and just felt very kind of just unenjoyable. It was a strange experience. We did go back. I'll tell you a bit about that later. But it was a very, very popular place, but a very contested place inside. A couple of pictures inside on the left. Again, cool pictures. Lots everywhere, wall, ceiling. And then on the right, that's believed to be the rock that forms Golgotha. I didn't realise how close the rock and Golgotha and where Jesus apparently was laid in the tomb are. I mean, that's a very short distance. I envisage it to be further, but apparently it's closer than we think. So, end of day 2. Day 3, we went north to Nazareth and Galilee. So Sunday morning on May 7th, we went to Nazareth and attended a church there called Christ Church Anglican. Nazareth is an interesting place. It's 80% Muslim, 20% Christian. So this church we went to, it's very, very few churches in terms of Anglican churches there. Reverend Nail, who we met, that's him and I in the middle of the photo. Lovely guy. It felt like going to a church here in terms of very familiar. It was in Arabic and English, the service, so it was dual language. It was great to engage with a different language. Very friendly congregation. And there's a lady who I met called Mary on the left. She's 85. She was born in Nazareth, lived in America for 40 years, and then she's back home, and she's attending the church again. So it was lovely to speak to her. Then on the right, we're celebrating someone's birthday. It was the keyboard player of the church. I can't remember his name. He was turning 18. There was Christmas cake and singing happy birthday, so it felt very familiar after the service to do that. It was good fun. And here's Nail saying the Lord's Prayer in Arabic.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
أبانا الذي في السماوات ليتقدس اسمك ليأتي ملكوتك لتكن مشيئتك كما في السماء كذلك على الأرض خبزنا كفافنا أعطنا اليوم واغفر لنا ذنوبنا كما نغفر نحن أيضا للمذنبين إلينا ولا تدخلنا في التجربة لكن نجنا من الشرير لأن لك الملك والقوة والمجد إلى الأبد آمين.
And then we went on to the Basilica of the Annunciation, where the birth of Jesus is foretold. It's believed to be around this area, and this is from Luke's Gospel that we read that in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph. And it was a funny place because it was a Roman Catholic church, obviously with lots of emphasis on Mary. So you can see on the right, these are 3 of the murals and pictures of Mary from different countries, and that just went all the way across the wall on the outside. And inside, it was a strange place. It was very, very spacious. Apparently, it's referred to as brutal architecture. I don't know quite what that means, but it was. It kind of, I call it the Marmite Church because some people in our group absolutely loved it, and they are from a kind of high church background. There's high veneration of Mary. I've sometimes felt that crossed the line into worship, but that was interesting to see, and I was pleased to leave and sit outside. But it was an interesting experience to go there, and a very, very important place, obviously, and an event in terms of the birth of Jesus being foretold. Some more pictures inside. I mean, it was very, very impressive, and nice light that was kind of coming through. And then, wonderfully, we went on to Capernaum, so to the Sea of Galilee, and this was just beautiful by the sea. Play a little. This is what we were greeted with when we arrived. The sound of water lapping by the side of the lake. Oh, it was just so nice and relaxing to get there. And of course, Capernaum is when Jesus, chose 5 of his disciples to follow him. He preached "I am the bread of life" discourse here in the synagogue. He drove out an impure spirit in Mark chapter 1, and Jesus, forgives and heals a paralysed man in the 2nd chapter of Mark. So there's lots happened around here. An important place and a lovely, relaxing place to come to after the hustle and bustle of Jerusalem. So we came to Pilgerhaus, which means pilgrim's house, And this was a real oasis of tranquility when we arrived. It was so calming and beautiful. And this is a German association of the Holy Land in Tabgar, which is where we're located. It's from the 19th century, and it's located on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. And it says that on its website it invites pilgrims to stay and relax body and soul, something I think we all achieved. As one of my fellow curates put it, he said, this is where I belong. It was very, very peaceful. As soon as we arrived there, we went straight into the sea, swimming. It was just really refreshing. And then the next morning, straight up, 6 a.m, went swimming and watching the soft glow of the sun's rays on Tiberias in the distance. That's just a memory I'll cherish for a long time. So the beauty and the calmness of the place and the space to reflect was just great. And we think of so many Jesus' miracles and teaching that took place within this landscape. It was just breathtaking. Just done a couple more pictures here from Pilgerhaus out onto the lake. And then day 4, we went to Caesarea Philippi. That's kind of the northernmost point we went. It's about 25 miles north of Pilgerhaus. And this is at the base of Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi. It's the location of one of the largest springs feeding the Jordan River. And it's got an abundant water supply that's made the area very fertile and attractive for religious worship over the years. So numerous temples were built in this city in the Hellenistic and Roman periods. And here we just reflected on Peter's confession of Christ, where Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. That's from Matthew 16. And this short video clip just shows you some of the scenery, the lush, as the spring, the river, just beautifully crystal clear water, very, very lush, very green. And you'll see some of the other tour groups and in the rock you can see some of the shapes of temple worship. So then we went a short distance onto the Banias waterfall. Again, beautiful scenery. There's lush meadows, wildflowers, and this cool crystal waterfall. It makes you think of springs of living water from John 4. It was just a beautiful place to go and see. Then on to the Church of the Beatitudes. Again, this is the church is located on a small hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And this is what believed to be the traditional mount on which Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount. The current church sits upon a site from the ruins from a small Byzantine era church dating back to the 4th century. And this modern church you can see here, built between 1936 and 1938, near that 4th century Byzantine ruins. And the floor plan is octagonal, so the 8 sides represent the 8 Beatitudes. And the church was designed by the architect Antonio Barluzzi, who I found out was a very famous architect, under commission from the Italian Mission Society, with funding from no other than Benito Mussolini, unfortunately. That slightly soured the view of the place, but a beautiful location and a really important place to reflect on Jesus, that this is the place, around that place where the Sermon on the Mount was delivered. You can see the view and one of the paintings inside. And then out onto the Sea of Galilee, went on a boat ride. And then we kind of went out about 15-20 minutes, and then the skipper of the boat just cut the engines, and we just floated. Again, someone read out a couple of passages, so from Matthew 8, Jesus calming the storm, and then Matthew 14, Jesus walking on the water. So that was really special to think about. This is the place that those things happened. So that's day 4. Day 5, a very short walk in the morning to near where we were staying, to the Church of Multiplication. This is a feeding of the 5,000, the fish and the loaves. It was a beautiful little church with a couple of things outside. Well, outside on the left, this is the baptism font from the 5th century. And then on the right, inside the church, this is the bread and fish mosaic. Probably seen a variation of that around. That's from the 6th century. And then just around the corner, there was a church commemorating Peter's restoration, his primacy, called the Mensa Christi. And it's beautiful, right by the sea. Again, thinking about John 21, that lovely passage where it says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." And we just go through that lovely restoration of Peter following his denial of Jesus. And you can see on the right there Jesus and then Peter at his feet. Then we drove south to a part of the Jordan River, and there's an opportunity to reaffirm our baptism vows in the Jordan River. And it's one of those locations that I think this could have happened in terms of the baptism of Jesus. Our tour guide said there's more history than water in the Jordan River, and he was definitely right, because there wasn't a lot of water, and what water there was, it was pretty murky. But you can see some people in a different group in white getting baptised, and then some of our group on the right being very British and just putting their feet in. But you can see just over the other side of over the river, that's Jordan. We see the 2 flags. And so a few of the soldiers were around there kind of watching what was going on. I think they're just checking no one's swimming over to the Jordan. But again, we reflected on a passage like Mark 1, where Jesus is baptised. And we then, again, following scripture, thinking about Jesus being sent out immediately after his baptism, into the wilderness, and this amazing scenery that we're suddenly in this Wadi Kelt, it's called. And this is the kind of place that you can imagine Jesus being led into. So from Mark 1, we read, "At once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days being tempted by Satan. He was with the wild animals, and angels attended him." So we just sat in this scenery for about 30-40 minutes, just reflecting and thinking what that must have been like, what wilderness means. And that was very, very dramatic and beautiful setting. So not like desert wilderness, but a different kind of wilderness I hadn't anticipated before. So then day 6, we back in Jerusalem, and on the left you can see the garden tomb and the Western Wall. On that morning we walked the Way of the Cross, also called the Via della Rosa, and this is the 14 stations reimagining and reflecting on Christ's journey to the cross. And yeah, that was really interesting. It was very busy, but it was really helpful to go on that journey. And so 2 of these sites, especially the Western Wall, again, this will be very familiar to a lot of you, and this is a portion of the ancient limestone wall in the Old City that forms part of the larger retaining wall of the hill, known to Jews and Christians as the Temple Mount. And the Western Wall plays such an important role in Judaism due to its proximity to the Temple Mount. The wall is the holiest place where Jews are permitted to pray outside the previous Temple Mount platform. And this is presumed the presumed site of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred site in the Jewish faith, lying just behind it. And apparently Jews will often recite and pray Psalm 79, which starts, "O God, the nations have invaded your inheritance, they have defiled your holy temple, they have reduced Jerusalem to rubble." So quite often when you sing them praying and and rocking. That's one of the texts that they will recite. But it was an interesting experience, kind of observing them. And then finally we went to what's believed to be a possible location for Emmaus, the church, the location where two disciples meet Jesus on the road to Emmaus, but they're not certain where Emmaus actually is or in what direction the two men walked. So like lots of things, this is an approximation. This is this is what it could be like. But the place was called Abu Ghosh, and it was beautiful inside. They had these amazing frescoes. As you can see on the right, they'd all been deliberately defaced. So that's kind of removal of their faces and features, probably deliberately by the Muslim groups, or they just didn't want to depict people. But originally they were painted by a Byzantine artist between 1150 and 1175. But that was a good place to go to think about again Jesus meeting these two disciples on the road, and then no sooner had he revealed himself, but he then disappeared in front of them. And just to end, there's a few more photographs of Jerusalem, and anyone who's been there, you'll see you'll know how vibrant it is and how busy and how colourful, and the smells and the sounds. I loved it. I thought it was a great place to visit. And this is the Damascus Gate at night, the nearest place to where we were staying into the old city. And a picture of most of us, a couple missing, but that was most of the 30 curates, Bishop Christopher's chaplain, Alan, and the two clergy with us, called Anne and Wendy. It was a really good trip. I'm very, very grateful that I went, and lots to think about, lots to reflect on. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So it's a pleasure sharing that with you, and I hope that has been of some interest to you. Okay, thank you very much for listening and watching. Bye for now.